Japanese school children learn to feel the proper reverence for national heroes, for by implanting such devotion, the empire is assured of a youth imbued with fanatical courage and militarist ideals.
We've all heard of the Japanese imperialism during World War II, the attack on Pearl Harbor and Hawaii, and maybe even the kamikaze methodology that they utilized in the war. But how did Japan manage to become the superpower that it was during the mid-1900s? And how did their education system contribute to their evolution? To truly understand the development of the Japanese Empire, one must delve into the historical development dating back to the Edo and the Meiji period, where the nation was transitioning from a feudalistic samurai society into a modern industrial center. The Edo period, also known as the Tokugawa period, named after the shogunate Tokugawa Ieyasu, was known for their internal peace and stability and economic expansion under the shogunate, under a government system very similar to a military dictatorship. See, in the Edo period, the emperor was at the top of the social pyramid. However, the true ruler was a shogunate, the military leader who ruled Japan. Then you had the merchants and the craftsmen down below. This historical development of the militaristic government structure played a huge role in impacting their administrative decisions in the future, as they will experience similar types in the 1900s. When the Western powers came knocking on Japan's doors, it marked the end of the Edo period and thus the Meiji period began. This also sparked a national identity crisis for the Japanese, as the government was conflicted between Eastern Confucian values and Western values of self-reliance. For those of us Confucius about Confucianism, let me explain. Confucianism highly reveres respect for the elders and serving others, also known as filial piety, and collectivism, while Western values contradict exactly that with their personal advancement and independence. Here's a prime example of this internal struggle. The Japanese Minister of Education, Kinmochi Saionji, even said, "Today, there are many who are enamored by harmful Eastern customs and are unwilling to change their ways. They are a hindrance to the progress of civilization." During the Meiji period, Japan had to find their own national identity while pursuing the ideals of democracy, and this is where their education system came into action. The Meiji period was a period of modernization for Japan, and there was what was known as the Iwakura Mission in 1871, where they sent Japanese students and government officials to various parts of the world to learn about the European government structures and education systems. During this voyage, they even brought back some Germans to teach at their colleges, and the Germans assisted in expanding mining practices, infrastructure development, and artistic movements. When the Japanese were establishing their new system of government, they were heavily influenced by the German government structure as well. Here's the thing. Democracy was a fairly new concept for the Japanese, so merely teaching Japanese history was not enough to convince the populace, as the public never had a sense of investment or involvement in the government. Instead, they needed a national figure to rally behind, to manufacture patriotism, and therefore, they utilized the emperor to do exactly that. The Japanese government started to put pictures of the Meiji Emperor and Empress in 1886 to create a national identity behind this idea of service for the country. These pictures became so important to the Japanese people that they were even sacrificing their lives for them. In one instance, an elementary school teacher gave up his life to retrieve the emperor's picture from the school during the Shinriku tsunami, and other instances of people sacrificing their lives for the emperor's pictures followed suit. This idea of sacrificing one's life would even be seen in the Second World War, as kamikaze pilots, suicide bombers who would crash their planes into American ships, believed in the same ideals as those teachers, that they were dying to protect their families, their elders, and the emperor. Japan's education system also played a huge role in their economic development, which allowed them to rise above their Asian counterparts and essentially set the stage for their imperialistic practices. During this time, children were required to go to school, and people also had to work for degrees in order to obtain jobs, which decreased income gaps and fostered economic growth. This economic growth established Japan as a superpower among Eastern countries, all the while maintaining their identity, as they often banned Western religious practices such as Christianity and practiced Shintoism instead. Once again reinforcing this idea of loyalty to the emperor, one of the beliefs of Shintoism was that the emperor descended from heaven and that he was semi-divine. For a little while, Japan flirted with democracy and even had prime ministers, but in 1932, Prime Minister Tsuyoshi Inukai was assassinated, and even though the concept of the prime minister continued, military powers took control once again. The military regime then utilized education to push three ideals: national unity, loyalty and patriotism, and dogged perseverance. In the late 1930s, under the military regime, the Ministry of Education issued the Principles of National Polity, which called on the public to devote their lives to their emperor, and elementary school students would even write letters to soldiers going to the war front, glorifying their services for the country. At one point, Japan's physical training and PE classes were composed of bayonet training and throwing hand grenades. It's no wonder that the Japanese people were so willing to go to war for their country. They were fed this nationalistic narrative since they were little children at their schools. Sadao Araki, a right-wing radical general, was even appointed as their education minister, where he would promote militaristic ideals through education, and once again reinstill the ideals of the samurai code back into the education system, specifically the Bushido Code. The Bushido Code emphasized loyalty and honor until death, and the Japanese utilized it to establish that the service for the Japanese Empire was a duty and also gave a reason for the soldiers to fight. This document taught the pupils to put the nation before themselves, and also talked about the principles of Hakoi Ichiyu. Hakoi Ichiyu reinforced the ideals behind Japanese imperialism, and basically meant that it was Japan's divine right to unify the 8 corners of the world. They justified their actions abroad by teaching their population that Japan was simply freeing Asian countries from the imperialistic practices of Western countries. There were numerous propaganda pieces based on the notion of Hakoi Ichiyu, some even saying that Japan would free Asians from Europeans, and one of these pieces of propaganda included the Declaration of Greater East Asian Cooperation. This was a pamphlet that romanticized military rule with images such as this page, known as Our Commander, saying that their commander was kind-hearted and demonstrating that the public should revere such figures. Here's another page that shows that the Japanese were freeing the Asian countries, and the image shows countries like China, Philippines, Thailand, Burma, and India, and it states that Japan was responsible for their freedom. So it's important when looking at these issues like Japan's involvement in World War II to contextualize the upbringing of the Japanese civilization and the contribution of the education system. And this isn't to justify their actions by any means, but merely to provide insight into how their society was molded over an extended period of time to reinforce their imperialistic practices. This idea of contextualization doesn't merely apply to the Japanese, but must be utilized in analyzing all historical events, so that we can truly understand the nuances behind certain major timelines and their complex development.